So obviously being a window geek, I wanted to know how these windows were constructed, how are they put together. Now I know, just because I'm a window geek and because I study historic preservation, that true windows from the Georgian and Federal period are thin. They're 1 inch thick. Oftentimes the top sash is fixed. The frame is built so that top sash actually sits not expecting to move and the lower sash moves, oftentimes not even counterbalanced. So I'm familiar with the way these things look. I also know that the mutton profiles in a Georgian window are going to be much thicker than in a Federal profile. So there's things that I'm like in my brain, kind of like, yeah, I know how all these parts, I know how to recognize those things, but actually seeing that window sit on top of the frame, I wanted to see how that was all coming together. So Nathan works for Michael and they kind of work in cahoots. Nathan is saying that for these windows, they've got a guy. You know, I've got a guy for that. And so this guy is someone, and really a dying art, but he has a small shop where he's actually hand making historic sash the way they would have been done hundreds of years ago. I couldn't wait to go see this shop. Okay guys, Brent Hull back with Nathan and Michael. We're in front of a window sash shop. We're gonna be stepping back in time, looking at this way of doing things. We're talking about windows and these windows that hang on the outside of this house, which is something that's very new to me, but something that's very familiar here. He's making your sash. You guys have been working with him for a while.
A plank frame, and we'll see more inside. That is a Morrison tenon frame, roughly 3.5 inches by 2.5 inches. Morrison tenon together on all the 4 corners. And then that is nailed from the inside of the frame through the sheathing to the outside. So you don't see any nails on the outside.
But I mean, these are single hung windows, right? We got a fixed upper sash, a lower sash that would be held open with sticks and pulleys and things like that.
Sticks and pulleys, and later on in the 19th century, they're creating all kinds of devices like a lever action that clamps against the sash from the casing or the jamb, and it holds the sash open in whatever position. There's little buttons that you push in that click into notches as you go up and down.
So the front of this house, right? We're talking about a 1740s house.
1725.
1725.
Yep.
So these windows on this face of that front face are these old windows.
Right.
When you go around to the 1830s edition, will we change windows?
We're reusing the original 1836 jamb, casing, sash. Everything is in very good condition from 1836.
So how many windows is he making for you?
He's making 15 windows.
15
and
windows.
then we have 11 of the original 1836 windows that we'll be cleaning up and putting back into the house.
Great. Let's go check it out. Go back in time.
Okay.
Our time machine. This is old school here. You know, windows, as you may have heard me say, probably heard me say, are the eyes of the home. They're the things that are most definitive. The reason I get all upset about windows so often is because they're so important architecturally. And so getting the windows right on this building is really important. The proper size of the window pane and the glass, and that standardization, that early making of glasses and the size of it and the proportioning system of how that comes together. All those things are really important. So I was fascinated to hear how windows were going to be put together on this 1724 house. Okay, so we're in this historic shop. I mean, there's some incredible tools in here. I see, you know, the bandsaw wheel there with the decorative wheels. I see the painting on this stuff. We're back in time. I mean, I see Babbitt bearings here with the square head. That's pretty dangerous, but that's old school. We've got hand tools on this wall, hand planes, which we'll check out. He's making sash here, and essentially this is our window, right? This is the window we're trying to make. We've got a fixed upper sash and then this lower sash that moves up and down. But this is the frame that you're nailing to the wall. Is that true?
So that's the frame. These are a little more. This is just models of different joinery types. So we have this is the face of the frame that faces outside. You got the rabbet for the sash to sit in. The top rail and the stiles in the bottom rail. Bottom rail is a little bit heavier and has a profile to it for the outward slope in the top.
And we're looking at all different styles here because and these would all have different tracks that you're putting together, stops on the inside. This one, look at the framing and the the pitch sill, the cove underneath there. Regional differences, just like you'd see regional differences in furniture and everything else, regional differences in frames, right? And so how it's put together. One of the things that's clear when you're looking at windows of that period, true historic windows of that period, is that there are regional differences. The way the sill is made and the frame is put together. If you're familiar with colonial furniture, you'll know that there's a New York ball and claw, and there's a Philadelphia ball and claw, and there's a Boston ball and claw, because the way the craftsmen in each of those different areas would carve the ball and claw was different. And so you'd have this regionalism. Same thing is true with windows, which is cool because they were also made like pieces of furniture, that you had these craftsmen who had kind of worked through different ways of building the sash, building the frame so that it pitched water different, so it looked a little bit different. And so you have these regional things, which is really sexy as far as I'm concerned. These are typical, right?
These are typical. So this is modeled after, because the time period we're going after is 1725.
Okay.
So this is typical of that time period. Wider mullions. You can see the wavy glass. This is recovered glass from other projects. These are quarter sawn on the for everything because it's more stable.
Pine,
and it's all white pine.
One thing that's interesting to me, we're down in Texas. Well, obviously, we're much later than this. We're dealing with late Victorian, early arts and crafts things. You've got on these, you've got through mortise and tenon. This craftsman, he is actually kind of showing off the pegs as a walnut end grain, but everything's mortise and tenon together. If you get into the early 1900s, especially in Texas, you don't see this, right? They're not mortising those anymore. They're just pinning them with nails. And so certainly something like this is going to hold together much better. When does this start changing into 1 3/8, 1 3/4?
Right into the Victorian era.
Yeah, okay. Because that's what we're seeing. We don't really, if we see a 1-inch sash, we're like, wow, that's a really old for us. So the evolution of windows, and we'll go through this if you get my book on historic millwork, but the evolution of the windows is that the windows are very thin, 1-inch thick sash and smaller, oftentimes not counterbalanced. To the industrial age, right, our 100-year window is really a window that would have been designed around the early 1900s. And so this evolution, this change that takes place, especially through industrialization, so you've got a really handmade product, almost a furniture piece, and then you've got what we're doing, this industrialized historic window, counterbalances things, and then windows change after 1950. Most windows put into houses after that time are aluminum. So you have this kind of, let's just say from 1700 to 1950, those years of historic windows and when they last, and there's different variations of how they would show up in houses, and things like the Queen Anne sash that are in Victorian period. It's really quite dynamic, all the changes that happen.
One of the other important things about the white pine sash, I mean, these are very functional for long periods of time. We've restored sash that are 250 years old, and they're still going strong. It's something that has great rot resistance and old growth pine, and we find older growth pine that's a little bit denser that we use for our sash and our plank frame.
Well, it's interesting that you say all that because, what we're always preaching is that the great thing about the design of these historic sash is that they are repairable.
Right.
The new production windows, they'll have an idea that for 10 or 15 years and that window sash fails or whatever else, you got to replace the whole window because you can't fix the, whatever those pieces are. So what you're saying is true for 250-year-old sash, we're saying it's true for 100-year-old sash. I probably shouldn't get started, but I'm going to get started a little bit. The whole industry, and Anderson Robert Newell, I'll go ahead and say it, is like the worst thing that can happen to an historic house ever, okay? Because they're coming back and putting in a product that oftentimes doesn't match, oftentimes doesn't look the same. It's oftentimes plastic, that you're taking a true historic wood window and replacing it with plastic or vinyl or aluminum or something else. And so you're cheapening the way it looks. It doesn't sit the same way, doesn't have the same depth. All of these different things that, as I started and said, windows really define the character of a house and the character of a home, and replacement windows are just bad. And so realize that my career really was built on window restoration and rebuilding historic windows and learning about what makes them different and why they last longer, understanding the energy efficiency or the lack of energy efficiency, but not as much as you'd think. All this stuff, can speak for hours about this. Putting these historic windows back in really will make a huge difference for not only the beauty of it, but just architectural integrity, sustainability. It's really an important decision. So we're walking over to see the hand tools, the hand planes and things like that. And I realized that he's got set up there these different mutton bars and these different eras of building and eras of sash construction right there with the Georgian, the Federal, Greek Revival, all those different cool details all sitting right there. It was fun detail that you guys seen me sleuthing houses, going in, figuring out when something was built, right there on the table were the clues that I'm oftentimes looking at when I'm looking at historic houses.
One thing that's interesting as we look at these things, I got distracted by this sash. Your mutton bar, right, for your 1724 house is a wider mutton bar.
Considerably, yeah.
Yeah.
This is
well, there you see
right
right
here
there.
like that.
Right, and so this would be more federal, 1824 is what I understand. And look how they've changed the way the construction is, and just that mutton bar difference, right? You go from whatever that is, inch, yeah, down to 5/8 or something. There's part of the story that changes, that you look at something, how do you date something, right? You look at, there's an older sash.
So I'm gonna have a confession. That guy is a hand plane junkie. He has thousands of hand planes, okay? There's a whole subculture of people that, collect hand planes, but it was a custom tool, right? You're basically looking at the past and realizing that America was built with these kind of tools, was built with these hand tools. And so he has collected thousands of them, rightly so, I understand, but he kind of has a problem. I hope he gets some help.
Okay, so look at all these planes.
Yeah.
He's even got some of the examples here. But this is what you're talking about, that you have some of these planes, and for instance, if you're going to build that pediment on your shirt right there, right? That raking molding,
yeah.
And then, or the return.
Right. You only need a few feet worth of molding to draw up a knife, to make in for a cutter, then to have that made is like a week's lead time or whatever.
Sure, or longer.
A couple weeks. Whereas if you have the proper hand planes, now these are molding planes. They also have what's called hollows and rounds that you can mix and match and just make a short run of molding.
So the hollows and rounds are basically come in different widths and dimensions, right? And you'd buy a collection of them, and you can take those.
A set of those,
and so you could custom make a shape, right?
Correct.
Right, any size, any shape.
Right.
And that was what would be the equivalent today of, having the router bit set or whatever.
Yeah, the router bit set.
That allows you to make and custom make whatever profile and whatever deal you're doing.
Yeah, right.
Not only is a pediment one where you need short moldings, but a mantle and a mantle shelf is another one. But look at this federal mantle shelf. See the projections and things that are going out. Look at these planes and how they become those pieces that interlock here and show you, kind of where that goes and how this is put together. That molding too for this molding there. And, short runs of this thing helping you to build a federal mantle where you only need, 8 feet of this molding at the most. This is a much faster way of doing that. A lot of people might see a 1-inch sash or a Georgian or Federal sash, go, oh, no one makes that. Well, people do make that.
They do.
And so it does need to be something that we remember and push for and fight for, because otherwise more of those houses are just going to be pushed over.
We're going to lose that historic fabric of our country.
And this is the kind of thing that you would learn at North Bennett Street, right? I mean, using hand planes, right?
That's part of the whole program. There's, the 2 years, there's some that's done by Steve in the first year in terms of an introduction to molding planes and philosophy and the mindset behind it. And then they do a sash restoration in the first year. They find some old sash, maybe the bottom rails rotted out.
So Jackson's doing right now.
Put it back together again, and then glaze it. And then in the second year we do new sash production. So you find a historic house that needs sash, and then reproduce those sash for that project. Usually it's a 6/6, something a little simpler for students to take on. But there's students who've gone on and do that in their future work.
I think my favorite thing about North Bennett Street was learning how things were made 250 years ago, because the juxtaposition of that versus how things are made today is powerful. We can still do that, right? And just to the we can still, is a big deal. 200 years of work here, hand tools, early machine tools and later machine tools, all working together to kind of still craft and build stuff. It's pretty cool.
saddest part about going to visit this shop is realizing that this guy's a dying breed. Realize that there's maybe 10, probably 5 people in the country that are a custom mill shop making historic moldings, making historic sash like he is. If you're a young kid today, if you're 20 and want to have a business, go apprentice for this guy and buy his business when he's done. We need guys who will invest in this past because, you know, Michael and Nathan and myself even are always looking for craftsmen who can do this kind of unique trade and unique stuff. There's your future, right? There's your opportunity to learn, grow as a craftsman, have a great business, have a niche business that's protected, and do really important things. So that's pretty special, realizing how unique that guy is, but what the opportunity is for going forward.
Let's hand plane some moldings.
Yeah, let's do it.
So a really fun episode looking at historic windows and seeing this guy's shop going into the past. Can't wait to learn more on this project. I'm Brent Hull. Thanks for watching.